Right, so let's kick on with a question from the floor, if we may. Sure.
I get the impression that there's a range of degrees of rejection of Scientology. I know this is probably a given to you from the outside. What's wrong in your view with Scientology? And I mean, a lot of you have made reference to the damage that it's done to people, but not actually referred to what that damage is.
Okay.
Who's the question addressed to?
Everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start there and move across then. So.
Okay. I'm probably not the best person to talk about the abuses, but what I can say in answer to that question is that I'm friends with a lot of guys who were very senior in the church, guys like Martin Rathbone, Mike Rinder and so on. And they've all got fascinating stories to tell, but the most interesting story is probably what they've been doing since, frankly, which is essentially to break the monopoly. From my point of view, what's happened, and probably the main issue, the main problem at the root of corporate Scientology and all its consequent abuses is that the subject has been monopolised. The Church of Scientology considers itself to be Scientology, and they're not really, or not at all, one and the same thing. The Church of Scientology is a cult by whatever yardstick you wish to measure it by. It's got abusive practices, it has very insidious indoctrination techniques, and there are a lot of lives that have been and are continuing to be ruined. My standpoint, if I had to put a label on myself, I would probably call myself an independent Scientologist. So there's a lot of things about the subject I think are valuable, which might put me at odds in some ways with some of these people on this table here, but I'm more than happy to sit alongside them, because this is a humanitarian endeavour as far as I'm concerned. So the initial target is probably to break the monopoly and make it possible for people to practice freely whatever they want. I'm sure there's not a person on this table that would disagree with the idea that anybody should be free to believe in and practice what they want.
Absolutely.
You all agree with that, right? The issue becomes when you are told what to believe, how to believe, and when to believe it, and so forth. And that's really what we're talking about here. Marty Rathbone, who, as many people know, was the number 2 in the church for decades, started a blog in 2009, and it's been quite an interesting process since then. His blog has become a rallying point for people who perhaps like myself, who still believe in a lot of the aspects of Scientology and believe in its efficacy and usefulness, and yet have had it, frankly, with the corporate structure and all its abuses. So in Marty's words, what's happening is essentially a reformation. In fact, there's a book right here called The Scientology Reformation, which deals exactly with this matter. The future of Scientology is quite possibly in this sort of model where the corporate structures are unnecessary and irrelevant, frankly. So the future might well lie in little small independent groups practicing Scientology without all the now you're supposed to, without all the abusive practices, without all the indoctrination, and in a sense let the market decide. If a Scientology group is good, well then people will go to it and they'll get the services. If it ain't no good, then they won't. So the free market would take its course in that regard. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, well,
partly.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal.
Okay.
Thanks, Martin.
The damage that Scientology does. Are we talking?
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with it?
What's wrong with it? It's debatable whether Scientology works or not. For many people, it's debatable whether it's a good thing, whether it produces good results or bad results. These are common contentions amongst Scientologists, ex-Scientologists. My position is very much, I'll take what's workable from the subject and use it and play with it and see what I can do with it. And anything that hasn't really proved workable, for me, is something that is yet to be established. I guess I certainly differ from your experience in Scientology. Your experience, for you, your certainty that Scientology brings about certain results and you've had those results is very real for you. I would say there are some things I did with Scientology that did seem to have good, tangible results, but I know you were asking a question, or someone was asking a question earlier about the OT levels and OT powers. I've done OT5. I've yet to see those results. I've yet to see the results promised, and I did them, and I can quite honestly say no. I did not get the results I expected, and I'm not quite sure what it was I got from those OT levels yet. But certainly, there's been other parts of Scientology that I have found quite workable and I have enjoyed using. So I think it's all down to a matter of personal experience. The other point I have to make is I reserve my judgment on those OT levels because the OT levels, the auditing I received was done in a very oppressive, very controlling environment. Now, if you take an environment where perhaps with Marty, where this technology is applied without the control and oppression of the church, perhaps they do have these miraculous results. I don't know. I personally haven't experienced those because I wasn't able to enjoy that. When I did the 15 years or so that I was involved with the organization and with the spiritual advancements of the organization, whether it had been before or not, I don't know, but certainly the time that I was doing Scientology, it was a criminal, corrupt organization. It was a mind-controlling organization. And I wasn't aware of it at the time, because I did join the Sea Org and had the heaviest, it's a full-time organization where you work as a full-time Scientologist. And I was cut off from the outside world, cut off from any critical, from being allowed to see any sort of critical information about Scientology. And so when I joined, I only saw the positive side, and I only saw the opinions of those people inside. And people had done the OT levels, were saying how miraculous it was, and how much it had changed their lives. But no, personally, I didn't see those results. I'm very much sort of still playing with it. As regards to the destruction that the organization does, I have seen CIA mafia tactics leveled at anybody who dares to demonstrate any even-footed critical thinking. For example, inside of this, you're not allowed to say, well, I didn't get these results. You're not allowed to listen to any other person's opinion that doesn't align with that. So it's the brainwashing is insidious, and it's dangerous, and it's very, very effective. And there's a lot of money. This money has been, this corporation has become a huge controlling corporation with a lot of money that can be used to silence people, that can be used to destroy people's lives. And along with that, you have the power that they have through the brainwashing to get people to disconnect from their children or their mothers. And I think for me, something that can have that much power over a person's decisions to do is incredibly dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I think going back to your independent Scientology versus organized Scientology, for now I'm sort of straddling the line between the two, between ex-Scientologists and independent Scientologists, I guess. We're all at varying, interestingly enough, we're all at different degrees here of somebody who's very committed to the subject still, somebody who's very level-headed and looking at the information. I don't know exactly where you stand, but I would say I'm a little further over to the sort of, well, I'm not quite sure about all of this yet. And in terms of where independent Scientology is going in the future, the proof will be in the pudding. If this technology works outside of a corrupt organization, it will work and people will be attracted to it, and hopefully they won't be stupid enough to pay vast amounts of sums for to discover the ultimate truth that any any religion is trying to sell you at the end of the day. Here's the ark, the lost truth. Here is the Holy Grail. Like any religion that's trying to sell you something is offering you the Holy Grail, and it's no different with Scientology. Does that Holy Grail exist? I don't know. Time will tell. But the corruption, the control, the destruction of lives, the CIA tactics, the private investigators, the destroying of families, holding of family members as hostage inside the church through the use of disconnection, and the mind control and to me it's a destruction of the soul. It's a destruction of who a person is. It takes a person and it just takes away all of his independent free thinking and turns him into a machine. And I've observed it again and again and again.
Do you have an example of that hearing that's taking place here in the St. Hill, I suppose?
I probably had about 200 friends in East Grinstead, close friends. People I lived with, people I worked with, people I confided my closest secrets to. I'd say an example of how controlling and manipulative and insane this organization would be 200 of your former close friends, godparents of your children, teachers of your children, closest confidants, ex-husbands, ex-fiancé, people you've known and loved for the last 20 years. Overnight, within a space of a week, 200 people cease talking to you, cease having anything to do with you. A number of your closest friends are then agree to spy on you and give damaging information on you to the church. That is an example, and that is a true example.
And that's for leaving or for criticising?
That is for befriending Marty, for listening to Marty Rathburn, for listening to people listening to whistleblowers who left the church, for talking to whistleblowers, for talking to members of Anonymous, for daring to communicate with anybody who is not giving you the party line from within the church. That is the only source of information you are allowed to accept, believe, study, read, etc. If you don't do that, you're in or you're out.
Okay. John?
Okay.
I'll go last.
Okay, well, I believe Scientology is damaging from the word go. I have no faith in any of its practices whatsoever. I disapprove of any form of Scientology, independent, free zone, or corporate Scientology. Hubbard was a liar, so how could anybody believe anything the man committed his name to? So all Scientology enables you to do is attain an arrogant sense of oneself, thinking you're the only one on the right path. You're self-assured, you're superior to everybody else around you. It just contains a staff of personnel which are totally untrained in matters of the mind, yet they claim they're the authority on the mind. They're practicing amateur psychology, but yet they're preaching against the merits of real professional psychology. I don't think their ways are effective, because you feel the positive results of auditing. You only feel it while you're in the session. Once you come out, face the real world again after your session, you're right bang, you're slap bang where you were before you went in. It's just a false and instantaneous I don't know, elation. It's very brief. I think by practicing independent Scientology, if you're doing the auditing outside of the Church of Scientology, you're still engaging in the same processes as they were inside the church. So I don't see that the results are going to be any different. You're still tinkering in matters of the mind, which are extremely dangerous. I've seen the results, the failed results of this auditing. The more time I spend observing indies and other various practitioners of Scientology outside the church, I can see that the results for themselves. That Scientology does not work. And even if you could leave your body, why the hell would you want to? Because you're going to be a long time dead. You know, you'll be deceased for long enough. So live your life. Just get on with things. I don't think Scientology strengthens you in any way. It just isolates you from people. And even if you are practicing it outside the church, I've seen plenty of the independents who still engage in disconnection. You know, they want to indoctrinate others around them into independent Scientology. What are they really? They're just Protestants of Scientology. So really, what difference does it make? Scientology is Scientology. It doesn't matter what denomination it is. It goes by the words of Hubbard, a liar, and his family, his own blood, come out and admit this about the man. So it baffles me to see people still clinging desperately to this so-called religion. It is not a religion. There's nothing spiritual about it. There's nothing warm about it. Everybody is extremely false and cold. They're not the type of people you run to if you're down or in need of a hug. They're horrible, cold people. That's all I've found from corporate Scientologists anyway. I have nothing good to say on the matter of Scientology, so we'll leave it there because I keep rambling on and on about this subject. I've seen, we were talking earlier about, you know, we shouldn't be exercising these body thetans, you know, because it could turn to mental illness like schizophrenia. I've seen the results in our former mission holder of Dublin Mission. Let's just call him John Keane. He was seen, yeah, for want of a better name, he was seen at a tram stop in Dublin quite recently, speaking to himself. Yeah. Like, what the hell is that all about? Right? I think you've got my opinion on the matter, so...
Moving on.
Thanks, John. Thanks very much. Terrell, would you like to add to that?
I've been a Scientologist for more than 40 years, and I've been promoting it on the net for 12 years at least. I've also, for a longer time than that, been a critic of the church. And if you want to have a brief, actually very long rundown of the types of harm that the Church of Scientology is committed, if you get this leaflet, every line gives 4 or 5 different examples, and it's about 30 lines there. Oh, right, you've got one. That will give you something to examine in depth in the privacy of your own computer as to the harm that is done by the Church of Scientology. Now, something above that is the leader of the Church of Scientology is the one who sets the standards for the whole church and for all Scientologists. And what you know, there is something called the Truth Rundown, where Marty Rathbun, Mike Rinder, formerly 2 of the top execs in the church, have given their video interviews and interviews with the St. Petersburg Times about how Miscavige beat them up. 15 other top execs have also done the same thing. That's 17 people have attested to the fact that he's physically beaten them up, and he hasn't sued for damages. Then there's the case of Debbie Cook, who's the captain of the Flag organisation, the only place in Scientology that actually makes any money now. She was taken by Miscavige and locked up in a prison in the international base. She was stood in a dustbin for 12 hours, water being poured over her, a sign round her neck saying Lesbo, and Sea Org women slapping her on the orders of David Miscavige. This is in her court testimony, which was filmed by, I think it was ABC, one of the, or maybe other television companies in America. So these are on the record of the source of the abuse, or the main source of the abuse, David Miscavige, who is leading the church. So all these other examples of harm and corruption It's not surprising when you get a person like that who's the head of the whole organisation. That's all I have to say on that.
Very good,
Okay.
Tyrone. Can I applaud that?
Sorry, a little postscript to that actually. Interestingly, that incident happened around about, wasn't it about 2004? But she never said a word about it. She to the day, it wasn't until she was hauled before the court that she even said anything about that. Such was her dedication, such was her continued support for the church and for the subject that she loves so much, that she kept all that under wraps. And it was only until she was sued by the cult and why was she sued? The strength of that case was basically that she had violated her non-disclosure agreement. In other words, she'd been guilty of talking. Her actual sin, her crime had been, she wrote an email to other Scientologists, loyal Scientologists, simply pointing out that the church was not following some of its own internal policies. That was it.
Should do a photo with all of the members.
Yeah.
That was her crime. Just saying, listen, guys, something's not right here. You know, Hubbard says do this, and the church is doing that, with lots of specifics. No generalities, specific after specific. And for that, she was sued, and only then did she give the testimony that Teros has told you about.
That's right, yeah.
Make of that what you will.
Thanks, Martin.
Right, okay, I realise sitting on the end here that I probably am in the fortunate position of having been in the independent Scientology field for 30 years. I was one of the earliest to be kicked out in St Hill. I was kicked out in 1982. I was shown the front gate. My children were told to disconnect from me. My husband was told to disconnect from me. I was probably the very first to be so abused and mistreated, but luckily chucked out. So my husband followed 3 months later, and we started an independent group, the kind of independent group that Marty is talking about in his book. And then loads of others joined our group, and I started to do counselling in the independent field. So I've sort of pioneered some of the groups that Marty's talking about in his book and tried to do that experiment. What is it like to receive counselling and to give counselling? I'm using the word counselling rather than auditing. And to try and do the experiment of what's it like when you're not suppressed by some idiot, some megalomaniac who's just after money, who's just after power, who's just after suppressing other people for his own enjoyment or whatever it is that he gets out of treating other people in that way. And yes, I've had good experiences, and I've seen other people get good experiences, but I don't think the experiment can be, the jury's really out on it, because of course I still get upset when I hear of other people's experiences, when friends are held prisoner, when people I've known won't speak to me, when friends that are still in there 30 years on have terrible experiences. So you're not completely free when the word Scientology is just trodden in the mud, when you are still connected by the very fact that you use the technology, albeit independently, quote unquote, when it is still by Ron Hubbard the practices that you're using. So I still think the jury is still out. It is going to be an experiment that we do it in these independent groups, that we're going to try and make it work as best we can. I think I am sitting on the end here, in that I have had very good experiences personally, and I've seen other people have good experiences. So yes, the jury's still out. If we can really make it work in the independent of what is going on, and what is going on is absolutely abhorrent, what's going on in the Church of Scientology. But I've been out for 30 years, so I've really, in a way, came here to ask questions of the people that have been in more recently than me. I've been out for 30 years, and I've continued to do it independently. And it's a lot better to use it free of all that suppression. And that's all I can really say, because I've been out where the air is clear and people treat each other with decency and respect.
Thanks,
and
Vicky.
it works a hell of a lot better.
Thanks, Vicky. Steve, would you like to answer the question? What, from your position there or here, or?
Yeah, okay. Where do you want me to... Shall I say...
Whatever. I mean, is it okay if Steve stays where he is, or what?
No,
We
I'll
won't
come
catch
down
him
there.
on
Oh, I'll come down. Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. We won't get you on your own camera.
Yeah, the question was, sorry, the harm Scientology does.
What's wrong with Scientology?
Right, okay. Well, I like to say I am an ex-Scientologist. I'm not a Scientologist anymore. I'm certainly not an independent or anything like that, free zone or whatever. But having said that, I do reserve the right to use any part of Scientology that I see fit, as and when required, or if required. I'm not a person who says we should throw it all away, but I agree very much with Martin's statement earlier about letting the free market decide. You know, if it works and achieves results and people will use it and it succeed, if not, it won't. So quite simple, really. But coming back to the bit about the harm, I think it's important to differentiate between the Church of Scientology, which is the organisation, which is the thing that I have the most disagreement with, and the subject itself. So I'm just going to talk about the organisation, which is the so-called Church of Scientology, which to all intents and purposes is a cult. As to the harm, for me personally, I could talk about the money, which hurts. I spent about £80,000 over 20 odd years on Scientology, which does hurt a lot. I was just reminded the other day that I actually spent more on Scientology than I had on buying my house. It just sort of sums it
You
up.
spent way more than you did.
Yes, I know. So, and that is the ridiculous thing. £80,000 sounds like a huge amount of money for most people, but
You've got to fly.
it's exactly, it's small fry compared to a lot of people, and we are talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for a lot of people. So, although that hurts, to me, that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is the way that it corrupts your thinking and your whole thought processes. You're indoctrinated in Scientology to view the world very differently, and it changes the way you can think. And it's very difficult to illustrate that to somebody unless you've been through it. But you see, all these terrible things we've heard about coercing staff to have abortions, regging people until they're bankrupt, framing people for criminal offences they never did just to get them put in prison, making up things, lying, recruiting children into the Sea Org, ruining their lives. That is all justified to a Scientologist. And for someone who fully buys into that idea, as promoted by Scientology and the Church of Scientology especially, that this is the only way that we can achieve total freedom and everything else, and this is the most important activity in the history of the universe, not just this planet, but the history of the universe, then if you buy into that and you believe all those things, then all those abuses that we've talked about and heard about are totally justified. And that's the mindset of a corporate Scientologist, is that anything that they do, as long as it forwards the aim or does what they're told is forwarding the aim of Scientology, then all those things are totally justified. And that is the mindset that they have. That these things, no matter how many overts using the Scientology word, which is harmful acts, how many crappy things, nasty things you do to people, whatever you lie and cheat and do, as long as it's supposedly helping Scientology, everything is totally justified. And that's the mindset.
Mm-hmm.